Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the Seaman's Cinema Sit Down, Shirt On. Guys, over on the TV, you know what we're getting ready to talk about, and let's not waste any time because there is so much to crack into in this episode, man. Like, it's just crazy to me how much they accomplish, like, every episode of this show. It's just nuts. So let's not waste any time. Why don't you pull up a chair? Take a seat. We're getting ready to dive in, spoiler-filled, into Loki, Episode 5, Journey into Mystery. And I tell you, man, I was right. I knew this myself when I reviewed the episode this morning. That like on the second watch, I was gonna like this episode like way more. And sure enough, on the second watch, I like this episode even more, man, because there's so many cool things going on, and the way that Michael Waldron has written this show has just put it in a place where, like I've said all season, it's hitting those mini-series beats, right? Like when you have this weekly release of a 6-episode mini-series, like you need to reveal or create questions and mysteries, but also reveal some sort of payoff every episode. In every episode of the show, we find out more about something that we've had questions about before. And while we get, decent payoffs every episode, the overarching question of who's behind the TVA and like what's really going on and what is this show gonna hit, Waldron's put it in a place where he could go so many different directions with this ending. Like there's definitely something Kang that I think is coming. Like I've kind of been on that train right from the jump. But like he has it where he's got other options if it's not Kang. And all of those options can still lay all the groundwork for the multiverse saga, and I think lay the groundwork for the beginnings of the Quantumania story. Like, it's just kind of nuts that, like, you would cast Jonathan Majors right before Loki wraps, so during filming of the show, when that movie is like 2 years out still. Like we didn't even cast Thanos until like it was really necessary for him to be there. So even if you wanted to tie Kang in, you didn't have to cast Majors at that point in time. But the fact that he was, and the fact that that timing is really, really kind of in sync, it's one of those things along with the litany of Easter eggs that seem to keep pointing to him. And I know we've done this with WandaVision, plenty of Easter eggs pointing to Chthon or a Mephisto, and we got nothing. But this is a little different, right? Like, we know Kang is coming. They need to start setting him up and building him up. And it would make sense for him to show up just by what the story is. But, like I said, Waldron has set this thing up in ways where it doesn't have to be him. It could be somebody different. It could be somebody working for him. And it could just go so many different directions that's really keeping us on our toes in anticipation to see what the final reveal of all of the things that we've been wondering about finally hits next week. But, oh man, like, this episode, like, on that second watch, just looking at all the things that it sets up and it accomplishes, like, it was better the second time around, and, like, really is right there with last week's episode for the 2 best episodes of the season. And as I mentioned, Michael Waldron has been spectacular all season, but he's not the only creative force here that has been kicking tons and tons of ass. And much like I said in my non-spoiler review, which, if you haven't seen my non-spoiler, and you don't want spoilers here, you're not ready for it, you haven't seen the episode, please, go up there, check out the non-spoiler review, watch the episode, come back, join us for this super long spoiler review. I can already feel it's going to take a while to get through this one, but, like we were saying, man, like the creative team here has just really been building something, I think, kind of special, and why Waldron's writing has set the show up to pay off in multiple different, like, there's so many different directions, and he's got payoff set up for all of them. Like, Kate Herron has also just been a massive MVP. Like, what she's done behind the camera all season long has been fantastic. And what she does in this episode, man, like, she has some cool camera tricks. I mean, the way the show opens, just, like, one of those things that just mesmerizes you. And it's one of the things with the show where, like, I find myself time and time again just getting lost in the show because the story and the visuals and the score, like, it all just pulls you in ways where you're like, I can't take my eyes off this stuff. And Herron has done a really good job in, delivering cool camera tricks like that. In this episode, there's a lot of, sweeping landscape shots that allow you to see tons of things that are going on in the void. I mean, from Qeng Tower to, Yellow Jackets, like massive helmet just in the middle of a field. Like we'll go through when we break the episode down, like a bunch of these different things that pop up Easter egg wise throughout the whole episode. They're just littered in the void. And like I said, Herron does just a beautiful job of delivering all that stuff and showing it to us. And again, like the color palette usage, it's so good, man. Like when we are with Alioth and he is just taking things over, like that purple cloud and the lightning, like it just pops. And when he turns green at the end, when he gets enchanted and that lights everything, like it's just gorgeous thing after gorgeous thing after gorgeous thing. And while she can do all the tricks and all the cool visual things, she also knows when to just stop and let your actors do what they do. And this show has had a lot of dialogue and a lot of moments where two characters are just sitting down and talking. And when those actors are just chewing on that dialogue and their performance alone is all you need, Herron knows when to just settle down and let their actors do what they do. Like, she has set them up for success at every turn. And then all of the actors have been delivering. But the other big MVP that, like, I think I've probably mentioned in passing but haven't really called out, and I called out in the non-spoiler, is Natalie Holt. Her score is so good, and I just see, hopefully, like, wonderful things in her future. Like, much like Ludwig Göransson, when he came in and started to get involved with the Marvel stuff, and you just started to see his scoring capabilities, like, growing, and, like, Black Panther just delivered on everything where you're like, wow, that's epic, man. Like, put him in that conversation with, like, Michael Giacchino, who, has scored the Avengers, right? Like, Göransson has become another one of those guys who that sound just immediately represents the MCU, and I would love to see that happen to Natalie Holt. Like, I would love to see her take off in general in her career, but also be used to help build the sound of what Phase 4 will sound like, because she has been just stellar this whole series, and like what she does in this episode, man, is it so good. And like just that bum 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 bum, like that, the way she uses it is just brilliant. And when you look at this episode, on the overall, like, man, dude, like everything is just hitting right, and it's probably the most cinematic of all the episodes. Like, the finale that we get is good enough to be in a movie. I mean, it does kind of feel like, Feige was like, hey, we could probably take a shot at DC again. Green Lantern. Relax. Sorry. terrible cough lately. But, like, he found a cool way to make a smoke creature be badass, man. Like, Alioth is cool looking visually, and obviously it's not just him, like, Herron and this team created, like, a way to make a smoke monster dope. And, like, how they use the character and what it leads to and what it could be setting up. Oh, man, like, it's just all there, and everything that you want to theorize how you think this thing's going to go. Like I said, it is just there waiting for you. And then the cast has just been phenomenal, man. Hiddleston, and specifically Sophia DiMartino, like, as much as I have adored the relationship between Loki and Mobius, and Owen Wilson's performance just continues to be one of my favorite things in the show. Like, Sophia DiMartino has come a long way since her first, like, on-screen moment in the show to now, and like her relationship with Loki has now become like my new favorite thing, and getting to watch how this story evolves and how they are able to find each other in this moment when they need each other the most to get to whatever the end of this is, and how they just build all that, like, it's so well executed. And then like you get guest star appearances from these other Lokis, but really Richard E. Grant, who just crushes the hell out of this thing. He nails the classic Loki stuff so well, like from facial expressions to just the way he laughs and enjoys using magic and what he represents, like everything you would want a classic Loki to be. Richard E. Grant is just knocking it out of the ballpark, and like this is one of the best episodes of the season. I'm not gonna change my score, but like, man, is it like it's right there with last week, man. Like, these two episodes have just been so freaking good. I cannot wait for the finale. Like, I think there are big, amazing things coming, and one of those things, I think, like I said, could be Jonathan Majors as Kang. The fact that he is a known entity, they just reminded us, like, hey, he's officially cast as Kang. Like, I think there was an article within the last week kind of reaffirming the fact that he will be in Quantumania, that he'll be Kang. Like, they're telling us all that really early, and I think all the story beats lead to a Kang, and it would make sense for him to be the timeline villain of Phase 4. I think you're just gonna start setting him up for that Quantumania movie, which could be super important to how Phase 4 ends and what we get when we head toward Phase 5. And I dig all of that stuff. However, there is another alternative to Kang. This I would have to give credit to the Real Rejects, who I enjoy watching on YouTube, and kind of was watching some of their stuff, and they kind of talked about maybe Loki is the king of this castle we see at the end because of that shot we've seen in the trailer of Loki in front of a throne looking like a king, and very much he could be in that castle, and we will get to it in the breakdown, but I think there is a path where Loki could be the guy they see at the end of this thing, and it would make a ton of sense from the story perspective and how they've been building out this character, much like we've done with WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Like, we have really built up the heck out of the character that we need. Like, we've already done this with Loki, but this is a different Loki. You gotta remember, it's a different Loki, not the Loki that we've had. And this show has built him into exactly what I think the MCU will need going forward for the character. And it would make sense for him to be there, and I think there's also a pathway where if he is there, it could still be leading to Kang, and maybe Kang would still show up. We could still see it. I'm so pumped, man. We're going to break this thing down and dive into all the goodies that could be leading to all of these things. But another one of my favorite episodes, right here. It just gets better every single week, and I think this finale could be something special. I hope we get, like, at least an hour. Give me at least an hour, Marvel. I would love 90 minutes next week, but if you give me at least an hour, I'm here for it. But those are all my general, overall spoilery thoughts. Lots of cool things. Like I said, as we break things down, we'll kind of touch on all of them because there's a bunch of cool stuff at work here. But since we are getting ready to dive into our breakdown, it's time for everybody's favorite spoiler review moment from the Seaman, where you get to see me react to the episode and just kind of the things that got me either captivated or shocked or like laughing out loud, because there's some really funny moments. So why don't you take a look at all my reactions from Loki Episode 5, Journey into Mystery. Like that, upside down camera shot. So we're starting at the TVA, okay. Figured we would come back to the TVA next week. What are we gonna find out? What are we going on?
Is it the void? That's alive. And we're his lunch. Come on!
The void. Yo! What was that?
Plus an alligator, which I'm heartbroken to report I didn't even find all that strange. And now I'm running from God knows what, trying to get to God knows where. But what I need to be doing is trying to find a way back to the TVA.
I killed Thor.
You kill Thor? Okay. So now all our Lokis are there.
I'm eating the wrong neighbor's cat.
Tell them your story, Loki.
I'm a killer Alioth, and I could use all the help I can get.
Nah.
Hello. Which one of us are you?
Oh, man.
This is a nightmare.
So that is a variant version of himself. Oh, shoot. Oh, Mobius! Yes! Mobius, save the day, come on! Yes, let's go. It's
Why the hell is there an alligator in here?
He's a Loki.
Oh, jeez!
What will you do for the TVA? Burn it to the ground. Thanks for the spark. Well, see you later, Loki. Thank you, my friend. You're my favorite.
That's awesome. Loki's creating Asgard. Oh man, I'm talking about a distraction. So good.
What are you doing?
I'm gonna enchant it!
I don't know how.
You do! Because we're the same!
Oh, she got it. Yes. Dude, I mean, I say this every week, but I just get a kick out of watching myself watch these things. Like, I'm a kid in a candy store when these shows are on, man, and I transport myself right back to being a kid when I watch these things, man. These shows give me such a joy, like a childhood joy that, like, it makes me feel so good. But let's dive into Journey into Mystery, which, ironically enough, well, not ironically, I mean, it's so on point, especially when classic Loki has such an important role to play that, like, the original Loki title would be, in the comics. Journey into Mystery was a run of Loki books, and I believe also utilized for a run of books with Kid Loki as well, who also features prominently in this episode. So to use classic Loki and Kid Loki in an episode where they're front and center, and you have the title of those books, Journey into Mystery, just stroke that's the Marvel genius at work, man. Like, right, even before you start the episode, you're like, man, they're doing so many cool things over there at Marvel. Like, that's gotta be the coolest place to work. But we do open the show with the TVA, and with that really cool shot I was talking about with Herron, man. She kind of starts over top, but like even upside down from over top, and lets the camera just kind of spin and flip, where now everything is upside down, and then she kind of spins the camera into the golden elevator, and like just subtle, cool visual effects, man. Like as you push in on those doors, and it's spinning, like the designs on the door start to shift into lines and the wall of the inner sanctum of the timekeepers, and as the camera kind of rights itself and we spin into the room, like, you see the carnage of exactly where we left off, man. Like, B-15's on the ground, a couple of the other hunters are on the ground. You got Sylvie standing over top of Renslayer. You got the broken timekeeper head on the ground, and the camera just kind of pushes in on that, and the smoke is still filling in the room, and it kind of clusters together so that you can, boom, zoom and kind of dissolve right into the smoke of the void. And that is what we find out is the name of this place. The Lokis tell Loki as we join them that this is the void. And this is, basically, as we watch the episode, learn, like, this is the last stop at the end of the timeline. Like, right before you get to the end of time, the void is kind of the thing that's in the way. So, again, as Herron, like, continues to use this what looks like one consistent shot, obviously a bunch of digital cuts in there. But as she comes in, man, we just get this beautiful, like, overarching shot of the void, and we kind of just soar through it. And one of the first things we see is that destroyed Avengers Tower that we saw last week. And it's one of those things where now in this perspective, if you freeze on it, you can actually see the name on the tower, and it says Kang Tower, man. And in the comics, there's a storyline. This is stuff that I am not familiar with. I had to go do some diving research. Like, what is Kang Tower? Why does it say that and not Avengers? And in the comics, Tony sold Avenger Tower to this company, Qeng, Qeng. And at the end of that run, you find out that company is actually owned by Kang. Right away. Like I said, they're much like WandaVision. There have been Easter eggs pointing to Kang right from the jump. I mean, as soon as Ravonna Renslayer appears on screen and you find out that that's her name, you're like, well, she's connected to Kang, and, well, Kang would make sense as a timeline villain. And right away at this episode, we're reminding you right up front, like, hey, hi, remember this? And this could be a misdirect. Like I said, we could lead to something different, but I think we're just reaffirming as we reach the end of the episode that, like, all things are pointing to the timeline villain of all timeline villains, man, Kang the Conqueror. But just this wonderful shot, and look, there'll be other people who break this stuff down and get everything that's in here. I just kind of saw some of the most obvious ones, and we'll point them out as we move through. But kind of get this wonderful layout of the void and this, destroyed section of New York City that's combined with other sections of the world that apparently can be pruned. Not just pruning, people, but, like, you can prune objects and send them to the void, is how it appears that it works. And as we zoom in, Loki is just like, what's going on, guys? Like, somebody talk to me. Like, I get, we're all Lokis, we're variants. I got pruned, I end up here. I got important things to do. And every time he tries to bring it up, it's just like, don't die. Don't die. Like, survive, don't die. Like, that's what the Lokis do in the void, is they survive and they don't die. And Loki's like, that's great. But, like, somebody needs to tell me what the hell is going on. Like, and he starts getting really, really frustrated. And finally, I think Kid Loki starts to talk, and then Classic Loki, between the two of them, they just kind of start to fill in the gaps on what's happening. And they're like, this is the void. They explain that it's like, some place that when you get pruned, you get sent here. And it's somewhere off the timeline where, like, creating a Nexus event, or trying to use a tempad, like, one, there are no tempads here. If they could find it, obviously they probably would be able to get out. And since there are no tempads there, like, yeah, a Nexus event, like, nothing we do here matters to the ultimate timeline. So it's the perfect prison for anybody that gets pruned. You can't, I guess, actually, like, disintegrate the temporal aura to nothing, and whatever is left over of that being when they get pruned, boom, they end up here. And this realm seems to be overseen by this massive purple cloud storm, and you're seeing, like, wonderful lightning blasts that are like that bright white in the middle, but the glowing of the purple on the outside, and the cloud is purple, and they give it the name Alioth, which in the comics is, again, something I had to go dig and research on my own because I didn't know anything about it. But Alioth is a real character in the comics and is another character that points to Kang. But the visual that we see, like, as they mention it, like, you start to see, like, there's, like, an animal head. It looks kind of like a skeleton, like a skeletal dog head almost. And really cool. Like I said, they found a way to make a smoke monster, like, neat, and how he functions and what he does. It's all really dope. But for those that don't know who Alioth is, much like myself this morning, I was unaware. In the comics, he is the first being to break free from the constraints of time. right there is just a perfect in to utilize that character in a story all about time. But when you look even more so, look at the power set. It's just like what we see in the show. It just consumes and destroys everything that it touches. And this is a entity that has a larger realm, like 2-3 times larger than the realm that Kang has achieved in Chronopolis over the course of time. Like what Alioth has accumulated is way more, and in the comics they actually clash, and Kang figures out a way to create a border to keep Alioth out of his realm of the time line, like, and what he's doing, like, through time and space and all that stuff. But the fact that it's a character that, like, ties directly to Kang in the comics, and also just ties to time in general in the comics, lovely thing to utilize here, and again, just something else that's pointing us right at Kang. And it's not just Kang, there's also stories that connect to Ravana, where she kind of, after, like, one of the Kang's deaths, accidentally releases, Alioth. So, like, there are characters that connect to Kang that are being utilized all over this show, man. Like, it's one of those where, like, the vibe is just even stronger than what we were getting with Mephisto or Chthon, however you wanted to go with WandaVision, which is why I think there's a chance we could see Jonathan Majors by the end. But it seems here that instead of, if it is Kang, instead of him creating a border that keeps Alioth out, it seems like Alioth is kind of, been taken over or utilized in some way to protect the end of the timeline. Like, the end of time is, as we find out in the episode, beyond Alioth, and it seems like he's the guard. So while the Lokis think he's there to keep them in and keep them trapped in the void, it certainly seems like he is there to guard the end of time, which the void is the last thing before you get to that point. So I love all of that stuff. And like I said, it would make a lot of sense if Kang was atop the throne inside the castle that we see inside of Alioth when the doorway kind of opens up at the end of the episode. But from the void, we jump back to the courtroom where Sylvie, still has Renslayer, like, at gunpoint, so to speak, with the pruning stick, and she's trying to get answers, and it's one of these things where as, like, Renslayer lies more and more, and it's so obvious. The things that she's saying to Sylvie during this whole sequence, like, are screaming the fact that she is lying or telling half-truths about, like, the timekeepers and the timeline and her involvement in it, and how she doesn't know what's going on, and now she needs to figure it out. Like, trust me and we can work together. Like, it's one of those things where when you're watching it, like, the entire time you're like, oh man, Gugu Mbatha-Raw is just laying it on thick and, like, is relishing in telling the lies. Like, you watch her face, man, she is enjoying being bad and, like, doing things that aren't good as she tries to deceive Sylvie, and gets enough of it to shake hands, and Sylvie kind of hands over the tempad to her. And before we can find out what happens from there, we jump back to the void, and the Lokis continue to kind of fill us in on stuff. And the dialogue throughout here between all of the Lokis is just wonderful this whole episode. I mean, like I've said multiple times, Waldron's writing is really, really strong, and his dialogue is really, really important, both to allowing the actors to be entertaining with the dialogue, but also to provide us with lots of information that kind of filling gaps on things. And as they're, giving him these answers, Loki is still not getting any real answers to what's going on. He starts getting really frustrated and really upset. And you can just tell that it's because he knows that he needs to help Sylvie. Like, Sylvie is now back at the TVA alone without him. And, like, I think that freaks him out, and he wants to get back there as quick as he can. And the fact that nobody is really helping him is getting frustrating. And he just says some wonderful things, like, as he's like, I've had the most ridiculous stretch of whatever amount of time this is. Like, I don't even know how long I've been at the TVA. A couple days? When was New York? Months? Weeks ago? I have no idea. This has been a long run, and, like, so much so that, like, there's an alligator here, and I don't even question that, and, like, he just hates being stuck there. So finally, Kid Loki, as Loki is, like, ramping up and getting louder and louder, Kid Loki pulls out a blade, and that blade is Leviathan, which in Norse mythology is Loki's ancestral blade. And it's been used a few times in the comics, and he pulls it out here and kind of holds him at sword point and is like, bro, shut up, man. Like, if you keep yelling, that thing is going to detect us, and then it's going to and we don't want that, man. Like, you need to shut up and chill out. And this is, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. This is where the Lokis break down everything about Alioth and about the void and what the TVA's involvement is and the fact that you can't get out of the void. And they just kind of break everything down for Loki here. And what's cool is when Loki says the tempad, they kind of confirm, like, yeah, if we had a tempad, that would be the thing that would get us out of here. But, like, no tempads exist in the void. And we find out later from Gugu and Bathara that, like, the tempad can't lock on to that location from where they are. Now, this could be, again, one of those lies from Renslayer, or it could be one of those half-truths where it's like, they might not be able to use the tempad to lock onto and get to the void. But if you got a tempad and you can lock on an actual location outside of the void, you could get out of there. So it was cool that they kind of set that up to pay off later on. And then, as they're kind of walking and giving Loki the gist of things, he's like, you know, it's kind of like, how'd you get the crown, man? Like, you're taking orders from a kid. Like, what is that about? And classic Loki, like, semi-snaps and is like, hey, you show him some respect, man. Like, this is his kingdom. And the way that he says that, and the way that this older Loki kind of follows the lead of this kid Loki, seems to scream to me that Kid Loki maybe was the first. And when Loki asks him what his Nexus event is, like, Kid Loki, he drops, like, a hammer legitimately on us and says, I killed Thor. And that's what sparked the TVA to come. And you're like, oh, damn. And if that's one of the first Lokis to get pruned, it would seem to hint that, like, Kid Loki's been here the longest. It's his, you know, kingdom, so to speak. And time clearly must be halted in the void because Kid Loki hasn't aged at all. Certainly seems like classic Loki's been there for a while. He hasn't changed in age. It's one of those things where it's just like a quick passing line, like, yeah, this is his kingdom. It's like, well, why would it be his kingdom? Like, he's a kid. But if he was there first and he just never aged, could be something interesting to play with for sure with the character. But the fact that he killed Thor, like, whew, man, like, crazy stuff. And it's, again, one of those things where it's like, you're with a bunch of Lokis, like, did he really kill Thor, or did he do something different? But nevertheless, something that I thought was pretty cool and could be hinting at the fact that, like, Kid Loki has been in the void the longest of all the Lokis. And one of the other things that you'll start to notice in the void is there ain't really anybody there but Loki. And that could play into maybe Loki being at the end of this whole journey. And we'll get there when we get to the end of the episode. But again, we get some more landscape shots as they walk toward wherever their home base is. And as they get close to what looks like a nuclear bomb shelter. There's a giant nuclear bomb outside, and then there's a yellow helicopter that's like a mini helicopter or like mini plane that says Thanos on it in all capital letters, which I thought was just kind of funny. Like another one of the little Easter eggs hidden, like not really hidden, it was right there to be seen. Although I didn't pick up on it until the second watch through. But you get a nice little thing there. We also see a giant Yellow Jacket helmet just laying on the ground, and it's one of those things where it's like, I'm fascinated to find out how all these things came to be here. Like, how did you prune a giant helmet from Yellow Jacket? Like, what's that about? Like, why are objects in the void? That's something that I'm very interested to see if they answer or get to at any point, whether it's in this show or in the course of this phase as we kind of move through this giant overarching multiversal story that they're setting up. But kind of love seeing all of those things. And just outside, like I said, you see classic Loki use his magic. And, you know, he uses his magic better than any other Loki that we've seen so far. But he uses his magic to open the hatch. Like, clearly it must be sealed with magic so no one but him can open it. And they go down into what looks to be like a bunker. And we get one of these cool shots that I mentioned in my non-spoiler review where, you know, the camera just kind of follows them down. And as it follows them down, we kind of go through the earth. Very similar to the opening in WandaVision, I think it was episode 3, where you see like Vision kind of go through the floorboards of the house. And if you slow it down and look real closely, there's stuff to be seen. And you don't have to slow it down too fast, but there are two very important things, or just like wonderful Easter eggs. You have Mjolnir, which is just laying inside, encased in this dirt like grass as you go down. But then there's a little jar, and in that little jar, it is labeled T365, which I believe references Thor 365, which I believe is the debut of the character that we see inside of this jar, and that is THROG, the Thor frog, which is such a cool thing to see pop up. Like, it's one of those like Easter eggs where it's like, I don't ever need a story that involves, you know, THROG, but like throw him in there where it's like he does exist in the universe. Like, those are the things I love that the MCU gives to its fans. And for those that are unfamiliar with THROG, he was at one point a human named Simon Walterson, who gets turned into a frog by a witch, and eventually proves himself enough to be Thor. He helps Thor in some missions, and he becomes like the Thor frog. Crazy stuff in the comics, but it was really cool to see THROG pop up there. And then as they kind of get down, we see that it's sort of like a bowling alley mixed with like all sorts of other random assortment of things that all seem to be kind of fun in game like. It kind of gives you like almost like a carnival vibe inside this little bunker. And, Loki's just kind of getting the lay of the land. We jump back to the TVA, and we see Renslayer is talking to Miss Minutes. And, Sylvie still has the pruning stick and still kind of has the drop on Renslayer. And it's like, I need all the files on the beginning of time. And, Renslayer is talking to Miss Minutes, like, can we pull those up or whatever? And she's like, actually, I need everything on the end of time. She's like, I think that, like, the end of time could be, like, the thing that gets us here. And when they were in... Was it in the I don't know if it's the first conversation or this conversation, but Renslayer, when she's lying to her, I think it's the first conversation. When she's lying to her, she's like, Loki might not be dead. Like, when we prune people, they kind of go to a different place. And Sylvie kind of connects the fact that if they get sent to the void, that maybe there's something past the void, and maybe that's the end of time, and whoever's behind the TVA could be there. And, Miss Minutes is like, well, you can't get those records. Renslayer is like, yeah, sometimes, like, I don't even have access to everything. And, like, the end of time, it's just a void, like, there's nothing there that would be useful, and Renslayer and Miss Minutes just start stalling, like, they're like, well, how could we get to the void, like, if we were going to try to get to the end of time? Oh, and, like, Miss Minutes is like, well, we got that, void spaceship thing, like, that and Renslayer's like, oh, yeah, the prototype, like, it's built to withstand temporal energy, so, like, maybe we could actually get to the void through it, and, like, the minute Miss Minutes says it, you're just like, well, that's a load of hogwash. Like, that is the most convenient answer of all time. And it's just so clear in both Tara Strong's voice performance and everything that Gugu Mbatha-Raw is doing with Renslayer this week, that, like, they are just lying and trying to stall and figure out things for themselves in ways that can be beneficial. And you see it even with Renslayer and Miss Minutes going back and forth with each other. But Sylvie starts to kind of pick up on what's going on. And all of a sudden, as they're kind of stalling, you see a bunch of hunters burst in, and Sylvie quick grabs the temp pad back from Renslayer and does like a quick hop up into that like chamber area, like where Renslayer was sitting at the beginning in the courtroom, and she kind of hides out, and Renslayer's like, "Hey, come on, like if you just come out and I'll put you in a happy memory if you got any of those. Do you have any good memories? Like, I can make this easy for you if you just come out and give yourself up." And, like, Sylvie just kind of says to herself, I love this line so much, she's like, there's one. And, like, the minute she says it, you're like, is it, like, what just happened? Like, that moment with Loki, like, at the end of the world, before they got kind of captured, and then, like, everything that they've experienced, like, is that the one good memory that she has? Like, that's what I read as soon as she said it. Like, it was like, oh, man, one of those moments she had with Loki, like, their connection is legit. But anyway, once she kind of realizes what's going on, she just kind of stands up and knows, like, Renslayer is not going to help. Renslayer is clearly up to something. The only way that I can help Loki is if I get to Loki. And if she's not lying about where they sent him, then I'm going to just send myself there. And if they truly cannot follow, right, like if the temp pad cannot lock on to the void, then, like, at least she will be out of the TVA's grasp for a little while. So she prunes herself, man. And you're one of the hunters be like, she just self-pruned. Like, what do we do with that? And Gugu Mbatha-Raw's performance, like the last couple episodes, has been like so subtle but so good. Like, you kind of see her breathe a sigh of relief, but there is so much angst and like just anxiousness in the way that she does it, where it's like, okay, at least she's gone. She can't screw up like the TVA story that I'm hiding from everybody. Like, she can't reveal the truth, so there's that. But there's like this uneasiness that's just screaming, like, she's worried that if Sylvie's right, then, like, she could be a major threat to everything anyway, even if she can't get to her. And if, like, she can't actually get to the void, like, this is now a race. And from that moment, we jump back to the Void and back to the Loki hideout. And again, Waldron just delivering phenomenal dialogue as we learn a little bit about all of our Lokis. And it's one of these things where, like I said, the show is focusing on building up the character of Loki and just broadening the depth of that story. And by utilizing just this moment of all the Lokis talking, you're able to understand so much more about what makes a Loki a Loki. And, you know, you also have this hysterical gator who unfortunately cannot talk, but man, he can drink up some wine, you know, as they're all chilling. Like, I think it's boastful Loki is just pouring wine, like, right into the alligator's mouth, and he's just eating it all up, drinking it all up. And at one point, like, boastful Loki is being so boastful about, like, whatever the story is that he's telling, like, alligator Loki kind of calls him on it and then jumps and, like, tries to bite him, and everybody, like, jumps up to stop the alligator. Oh, man, great stuff. But, you know, kind of just not by, like, we understand why he's boastful. He likes to brag a little bit. And as he kind of settles down after being almost attacked by alligator Loki, classic Loki goes into his story. And he talks about, you know, how powerful, you know, magic is and how amazing magic is. And, you know, Loki just kind of wants to know what his deal is. And he's like, you know, and Loki brings up the fact that Thanos snaps his neck and just figures Thanos probably plays a key role in every timeline of a Loki. And, you know, classic Loki's like, yeah, things got bad for me when Thanos showed up, man. He's like, and I was in a situation where I needed to get out. And I wasn't trying to have my neck stabbed. So I cast a projection, an illusion that was so real, like even the Mad Titan believed it, and that let me escape on some space debris. And while he was floating out in space, he just kind of reflected and started to realize that, like, everything that he had ever done, and it always ended up badly for the people that he cared about, and, you know, like his brother or his family, and he is a burden more than he is helpful. So he decides to self-exile. And after self-exiling, you know, Loki's like, well, what was your Nexus event? He's like, you know, like, us Lokis, man, we're just destined to be alone, you know. We're at the end of the speech, I think he says, you know, like, we're the god of outcasts, man. And he's like, I got lonely. And I wondered, like, if my brother missed me as much as I missed him. And the minute I went to step in the direction of leaving the planet, the TVA came and pruned me. And that's where he's like, we're just destined to be the god of outcasts, man. And this is where we end up, where there's a whole bunch of Lokis that are here as well. And you kind of see this drive, like this story, and just the way that, like, the classic Loki is kind of accepted. Like, that's just our fate, man. Like, that's what happens to Lokis. We see it all the time. Look at how many of them are here. And that kind of drives Loki even, you know, gives him a harder push where he's like, no, that can't happen to me. Like, my destiny needs to be bigger than that. Like, I need to get back to the TVA. Like, have you ever met a female Loki? And, you know, classic Loki is immediately like, that sounds dangerous. Like, she is, but she's amazing. And, like, she figured it out, man. Like, she can stop the TVA, but she needs me, you know, like, and you're just seeing the way that, like, they're both in ways projecting, like, I hope the other one feels what I'm feeling, because, like, if she needs me, like, that validates what I'm doing, and, like, if he needs me, like, pruning myself is validating all that, and it's just this wonderful thing, and it builds him to saying, you know what, you say Alioth is a being, you know, that he could be, that like, is a physical entity, well, then I'm gonna go, then he has a heart, and I'm gonna find that heart, and I'm gonna kill him. I'm gonna go kill Alioth. Like, that's what I'm gonna do to get out of here. And all the Lokis start laughing at him. It's really, really wonderful, and, you know, Loki is just like, Gah, and he's like, you're all monsters, you know, kind of under his breath, and he goes to leave the bunker, you know, to get some air or whatever, and as he opens it, there's the President Loki we've seen in the trailers with all these other Loki variant henchmen with him, and he's like, well, which one of me are you? Like, which one are you? And Loki's just like, oh dear God, like, this is a nightmare. Like, there's more of them than just these three. Like, this is terrible. And as you know, that's starting to hit, we jump back to Sylvie, who now wakes up inside of a bus. So random where they end up in the void, and she's like on the ground again, like sleeping, and kind of wakes up in this bus. Gets out, and as she comes out of the bus, Alioth, like, is, like, in the background doing things, immediately swings his attention and starts right after her. And it's like, she can't even get a second to kind of get where she is, right? Like, our Loki, he got all this time with these other Lokis, had time to figure things out, you know, didn't really run into any problems. Boom. like going right for her. She just takes off. And this whole stretch, like where we really get up close with Alioth for the first time, is gorgeous. The visual effects here are tremendous. They are cinema quality, like movie quality effects. Like you could have put this in a movie and you would have been like sitting in the theater going, wow, dude, like check that out. Like that's how good it is. And this whole sequence as it chases her is just gorgeous. And all of a sudden in the distance you see a car coming and you're like, oh, it's gotta be Mobius. Like Mobius is coming to save the day. Like we've seen him in the trailer driving that car like a madman around the void, because obviously like you see the Sphinx and Stonehenge in the back, like where he's driving that car in the trailer, like, clearly isn't a regular place. So, like, you're like, yes, there it is, man, that's Mobius. And he pulls up, and she jumps right in. Sure enough, it is Mobius. And, like, he even kind of, like, warns her after a little back and forth, like, hey, you should be more careful about just jumping into a stranger's car. And she's like, well, we need to turn back and go after it. He's like, are you freaking crazy? Like, we need to get, and, like, they just get away from it. She's like, no, turn around. And he's like, I'm gonna keep going, you know, and they keep driving. This is where you see the Sphinx, the pyramids. You've got Stonehenge in the background too. And as they speed away from Alioth, we jump back to Loki, and now you've got kind of Loki in the corner with President Loki and all his goons, and they're like, we found you guys. And like classic Loki's like, son of a bee, man. Like or maybe it's Kid Loki. Like, you led them right to us, and you come to find out like he's trying to take power from Kid Loki, and as he's kind of gearing up, like boastful Loki like comes, he's like, sorry, your Highness, I betrayed you because now I get to be the king. Like, I betray you, give him what he needs, he's gonna let me be king of the land. And President Loki, just like a Loki, is like, well, funny thing about that, that doesn't really work for me. Like, it just works for me better if you just give me all of your power and I just keep running things. Like, that's how we're gonna do it. And then all the Lokis with him are like, well, as a matter of fact, and they all turn on him. We're like, yeah, we're not gonna let you keep running things. Like, we're gonna take it for ourselves. And this kind of leads to this crazy fight where, like, President Loki is like, chill, like, what? And he's like, wait, why is there an alligator? And the alligator just goes in for the attack and jumps up, grabs his hand the same way he was going after boastful Loki, and actually rips his hand off. There's no blood or anything like that, and that, I think, just kind of reaffirms that, like, you're not a physical, like, human like you would normally be in the void. Like, I don't think, like, you would bleed, you don't age, but rips his hand off, no blood, and he, like, is, like, kind of, like, shakes it off, and then the minute he realizes the hand is missing, he's just like, ah! As he screams, all the Lokis go crazy. And it's one of these things where this episode, like, speaks so much to what makes a Loki a Loki. And one of the things that makes a Loki is wanting to rule or having something to rule. And it's like, at this moment, as there's a power play happening, every Loki is like, well, I'm going to take the opportunity to be the one that wins this. And they all start fighting each other. And I mentioned this in my non-spoiler review, but like, one of the things that I think Herron's become really good at is having your focus be one thing, but having the stuff that's going on in the background of that focus, like, really stand out and pop and give you things. So you're getting all this, like, fun Loki action going on behind you. See Hiddleston, who's just acting his ass off, man. His facial expressions as he's, like, trying to sneak out. Like, I don't have time for this nonsense. Like, I'm getting out of here. And as he's going, like, it's getting progressively harder. Everybody's fighting, and they're like, classic Loki is like, F boastful Loki, he can keep fighting, but you, me, Kid Loki, and Alligator Loki, like, we can get out of here. And he projects, like, a projection that looks like all of them, and they go in to, like, fight some of the other Lokis, and as they're doing that, they kind of sneak out the back. Classic Loki creates, like, a warp, spot for him. They go through the smoke and come outside of the bunker, and like I said, they leave boastful Loki behind, and classic Loki just kind of reiterates, like, what makes Loki a Loki. He's just like, we're all animals, we just had Hiddleston say, like, you're all monsters, and he's like, it doesn't matter what we do or what we try to do. At the end of the day, like, for clearly most of us, it's all about finding that glorious purpose and doing it in a glorious way, and like, you literally can't trust any Loki ever. Like, we're all super, super broken. And then Kid Loki kind of chimes in, is like, yeah, when we try to fix ourselves, that's when the TVA shows up and prunes us all. And Loki is like, look, I want this to end, and the only way that we can make it end is if we stop whoever's behind the TVA. I think we're really close, and if you can get me to Alioth, like, I'm gonna find a way to stop all of this. And classic Loki and Kid Loki kind of, Kid Loki's like, good enough for me, and classic Loki's like, all right, we'll help you, but all we can do is get you there. We no further than getting you to Alioth. Like, we're not gonna risk our lives to help you on whatever this crazy mission is that probably will end up not having any kind of impact on us. And from there, we jump back to Sylvius. Jump back to Sylvie and Mobius, who are kind of chatting and kind of getting a feel for each other. And, like, Sylvie kind of comes to understand. She's like, no, you're not as bad as I thought you were. But, like, they just kind of question each other back and forth. And, Mobius ultimately is just like, look, I thought the TVA was good. I thought I was doing the right thing. And, like, Sylvie's like, yeah, kidnapping children and ruining lives, like, that's like, look, that's what what they were feeding us, I bought into. And he's like, I'm truly sorry for all of those things, even though he wasn't the one that came and collected her as a child. It was Renslayer. Like, he's like, I'm genuinely sorry for that. I didn't know any better. And you just kind of see them kind of have this connection and kind of like, hey, we're cool type of bit. As they're driving, she's like, we need to head back to Alioth. Like, I'm pretty sure the answer to all of this lies with that creature, because when she was running away from him, completely forgot to mention this, we get this awesome visual effect where all of a sudden you just kind of see her magic light up in front of her for a hot sec amongst some of the smoke and clouds, and her eyes light up, and then you see something, and we get this shot of this castle that we end up ultimately seeing at the end of the episode. And it's one of those things that as soon as Sylvie saw that, she was like, there's something more to whatever that is, so you have to get me there. And she ultimately, I don't think it's here, I think it's a little bit later, but she reveals, like, I'm gonna try to enchant it. I think she reveals it to Loki, and she obviously must have told it to Mobius, because like, she's very certain that this is a thing, but like, she's gonna go enchant it. If she can enchant it, maybe she can figure out what that thing is that she saw and how to get to it, and if that is indeed the end of time. So we jump back to Loki, who's trying to come up with a plan to kill this thing, and all of his ideas are just like, he has this whole plan. Like, yeah, now like, look, they kind of bring to a spot where you see some things that are getting pruned land, and Alioth comes and consumes this big battleship. And as he sees it consume the battleship and just leave it behind, looking hundreds of years older, and like the people that were on the ship turning to skeletons in the blink of an eye, Loki's like, maybe we should think this through a little bit more. And Kid Loki's like, hey, a car. And they all flip, and Loki's like, what does that mean? And Classic Loki's, well, it usually means like, cannibalistic marauders, but like, I'm not getting that vibe from this car. And it kind of stops and away from them, and they're just like, let's see what happens. And as Sylvie gets out, Loki immediately recognizes her. He's like, Sylvie, runs for her, man, but like, being a Loki, kind of stops short. And it's just like, what is going? And then Mobius gets out, and you get this wonderful moment where like Hiddleston legitimately like stops himself. Like, he's like, Mobius, and he goes to move for him, and same, just like the Sylvie, but even stronger, he like purposely holds off, like, wait, no, I shouldn't just go run right in for the hug. And he's like, how did you get, what is going on here? And she's like, we thought you could use some backup. And Sylvie notices the other Lokis, and she kind of goes a step to him. Loki's like, oh, no, they're friends of mine. Well, they're other Lokis, as you can see, but like, the initial thing he says is, they're friends of mine, and they're not really his friends, not yet. But like, you can tell that this Loki has certainly changed. He's evolved. He is not the guy we saw at the beginning of the show. And it's one of the cool things that this show has done, is evolve this character into a place where like, fans can really like the way that we potentially use him. And look, I'm also not saying that like, he's not keeping some things hidden and he doesn't have an alternate agenda for some of this stuff. He could. But it does certainly seem like he's genuinely kind of turned a corner. And they just kind of start to sync up, and Loki's like, yeah, man, I got this plan, like, I'm gonna go. And he's like, you guys are going after that too? He's like, cool, man, I'm gonna go kill that thing. And Sylvie's like, that's your plan? And you guys were okay with this? And the other Lokis are like, well, I mean, we tried to tell him other things, but he wasn't listening. She's like, no, we're not going to kill it. And he's like, well, then what do we do? And she's like, I connected with it when I was out there. And when I did, I saw something. And what I saw, I think I can enchant it, and I think I can, like, open up a door. And from there, we jump back to Renslayer at the TVA, and she's now questioning B-15. She tells all the hunters that are with her to get out, just leave us alone. She opens this cool cell. It looks like it's almost got like some sort of magical rune-type matrix-like effect on all the walls. And just provides this wonderful lighting for Wunmi Masaku, who looks phenomenal on screen in this sequence, like really pops, and then just knocks it out of the ballpark. She's so damn good. But, Renslayer comes to her and is like, the first thing, B-15 says, like, why am I here? And Renslayer's like, you're disloyal. And, B-15's like, disloyal to who? Like, the timekeepers are fake. Like, you saw that they were fake. And Renslayer's like, well, it doesn't change anything. It's like, it changes literally everything. Like, we have to tell everybody, like, what's going on here. And Renslayer's like, look, none of that's gonna happen. I need you to tell me what drives Sylvie. And, B-15 is like revenge. And, like, the revenge against whoever created the TVA and caused all of the pain in her life. Like, that's what's fueling her to get to the end. And again, this kind of reinforces that, like, worry, that worried look that Renslayer has on her face when she's kind of like, Sylvie's gone, but, like, shoot, what she could be getting up to. Like, if she's being driven by this revenge, this could lead to the collapse of the TVA. And right now, I don't have a way to get to her. And as she's, trying to figure these things out, like, B-15 just calls her out flat on the spot, and she's like, you're trying to find out who's behind this first. Like, you're trying to beat her to the punch, and I promise you, you're not going to. And I'm like, I just love how B-15's turned into, like, a rally horse, for Team Loki. Like, she's so Team Loki, Team Sylvie. I'm all about it. And she kind of laughs at Renslayer. Like, you think that you're in this position where you're gonna be able to stop it? Like, at this point, it's too far. Like, you're gonna lose, and it's great. It's wonderful. I love it. I'm not getting out of here. I'm glad you're not gonna win. And she kind of flips, and this is the area where Renslayer is like, I need all of the information now on the TVA. And, Miss Minutes is like, I don't know about that. And she's like, look, clearly whatever's going on, it puts the people who are in charge in danger. I have to warn them. And Miss Minutes is like, okay. And while it certainly feels like Renslayer doesn't know exactly who is behind everything, I think she knows that there is at least one person. There must be someone, like I said, that she's probably communicated to. And now it's like a race against time for her to get there first. And I certainly think she's quite a bit behind on that one, unless there are some answers in files, or if, Miss Minutes will give up those answers. I don't know if I completely trust Miss Minutes, and it seems like she could have some sort of alternate agenda. But we jump back into the Void, and Mobius kind of chats with the Lokis, and, they're kind of just chilling as they kind of gear up for whatever their game plan is going to be. I guess the thought is that the two Lokis are figuring something out, so the other Lokis are just kind of chilling, and Kid Loki's like, so Mobius, like, when you get out of here, what are you going to do when you get back to the TVA? And he's like, I'm going to, like, make sure that the lie is out and make sure everybody knows the truth. And like, just kind of, I think he says burn it to the ground later on when he's talking to Sylvie and Loki. But he's like, look, I'm going to go in there and turn this whole thing upside down, man, because that's the right thing to do. And then, Kid Loki just kind of looks off in the distance. He's like, well, I hope they know what the heck they're doing. And we jump to Loki and Sylvie, and this is like the most romantic moment in the show. And, this is one of those things where, like, this and WandaVision, there are a lot of similarities, and the romance side of things certainly is starting to kind of feel very similar. And while finding out that Loki was bisexual, and like we kind of talked about in that episode, like how cool it would be as if they committed to it and gave him a boyfriend, seems like we're getting the old switcheroo from Disney, like, hey, here's something that could be cool, but we're going to build this relationship between Loki and Sylvie. And, a little disappointing, but I think it's still in play. I think Loki could end up with a boyfriend. I think it's very likely that Sylvie ends up sacrificing herself by the end of this show. So, like, I don't think you could see a long-term relationship between these two. And I just dig the fact that it doesn't stem from the fact that she's a woman and he's a guy. It stems from the fact that, like, this is the first person that this Loki has ever really fully trusted, and that he has a legitimate connection with. They talked about how, like, they've been with people, but it's not real. You can never really get your hands on it. And this seems to feel real, and that is what's driving everything, which is kind of why I dig it. And this whole sequence is just wonderful to watch these two play off each other, because they play being into but dancing around the fact that we're into each other, like, so well. And like I said, just the way that DiMartino and Hiddleston have been playing off each other the last 3 episodes, like, I love this connection. It's made DiMartino's performance, I think, get increasingly better every time out. And as they're sitting there, the first thing Sylvie says is, like, Mobius ain't that bad of a guy, and just kind of, like, find that quick common ground. Like, you know what, you said Mobius was a good guy, you weren't wrong. Like, I think we can trust him. And then, she asks, though, she's like, but that whole thing he told us about, like, our connection and creating a Nexus event, like, that's definitely a TVA lie, right? And, like, you can tell just the way that DiMartino's delivering it that she doesn't believe it. And Loki just kind of plays along. He's like, oh, no, yeah, definitely a TVA lie. Like, no way is that real. And I don't think Loki believes that either. Like I said, it's kind of fun to watch them kind of pivot and dance around themselves and the subject of, like, what's going on between the two of them. And then, you just kind of get to this moment where they have a little bit of back and forth. There's a slight pause, and, Sylvie's just like, Loki is getting kind of cold. Loki, like, uses some magic to give himself a blanket, but doesn't, like, use it to give her a blanket or, like, use it to, like, go around her to bring her in. Instead, he's like, do you want a blanket? I give you a blanket. She's like, no, I'm good. But she's like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And Loki's kind of like, I don't know what we're doing. And she's like, I've never had friends. I don't have anyone, and like Loki's like, well, that's okay. Like, there's more important things to be done, like saving the universe. That's a pretty big thing, Like, Sylvie's like, yeah, I'm not saying that like it's the most important thing, but like it's a pretty big deal that we're saving the universe. And like, I just love, like I said, the way they just kind of dance around it, and finally Loki, like, uses his magic and doubles the size of the blanket to kind of pull her in, and you just kind of, again, get these kind of nice back and forths where she's like, what is this? Is this a tablecloth? Like, they're just being awkward with each other because they don't know how to commit in that way. And it feels like you're watching a pair of teenagers figure out, like, that they're into each other for the first time, and just the playfulness between the two of them, trying to deny what's very obviously there, was wonderful to watch. And, like, this really feels like the most genuine moment that either of them have had in the entire show. And you just kind of get, this place where, like, she's like, okay, like, maybe this could be a thing. And her first thought after all of that, and you just kind of have this nice little moment, like, as she kind of, like, leans in, like Loki even smiles to himself, like, yes, I did it, like, it worked. And she's like, but how do I know you won't stab me in the back or betray me right at the end, like, in the final moments? And Loki's like, look, I know everything that I've done as far as betraying people. I know why I did those things, and I know how it all turned out. And I'm definitely not that person anymore. And again, this is something that I think is really genuine from Loki. Like, I think he really has grown and evolved throughout the course of the show because of the relationship he has with Mobius, because of the relationship he's forming with Sylvie. And he's like, I don't want that, and I'm here to help you. Like, I'll do whatever it takes. And she's like, are you sure? Because if this does all play out the way we hope and we win, like, there could be a universe for you to rule out, like a timeline for you to rule out there. And Loki's like, well, wouldn't that just make me the happiest? And again, it's just like, you have that moment where it's like, all right, just go in. And she's like, well, I mean, I could hook you up if we win, like, 'cause she's the mastermind behind everything. I just love everything about it. And, like, like, they both are just kind of, like, honest for a second. Like, what would you actually really do when this is all over? And neither one of them really know. And it's one of those, like, you figure, like, maybe they can figure it out together. And I'm just like, man, I love seeing, like, just the way they play out. Like, they pop on screen together, and their chemistry is a lot of fun. But that leads us to what is the ultimate final showdown here. You see all our Lokis on a perch, and you get another one of these wonderful, beautiful widescreen shots where you can see, like, one of Ronan's ships is, like, in the ground, and in the distance you have the purple cloud and the lightning flashing of Alioth. And, then you flip into our Lokis getting ready to kind of part ways and tackle this, plan the way that they've laid it out. And Sylvie, clearly must have talked after their chat, under the blanket. And Sylvie hands the TEM-pad to Loki and is basically just like, all right, it's go time. And it seems like Loki's going to go back to the TVA with Mobius. She's going to go take down this thing. And it seems like the other Lokis are just going to peace out. Like, they've gotten you as far as they were willing to take you. And Loki immediately is just like, no, I'm staying here. I'm going to help you. And Sylvie's like, you don't have to do that. He's like, if you go, I go. And then he turns and gives the TEM-pad to Mobius so he can go back to the TVA. And Mobius, is like, thank you, and kind of turns to the other Lokis who aren't going to, because those, Sylvie and Loki, our Loki, are staying. He's like, I can take you guys with me if you want to come. And Kid Loki and Classic Loki, like, in unison, are both like, nah, like, this is our home. We know this place the best, better than anywhere else. Like, we're gonna chill. And Mobius is like, okay. Kid Loki then spins to act our Loki, and he hands him Leviathan. And he's like, you're gonna need this, so take it, and, like, here it is, like, the ancestral, sword from Norse mythology being passed from one Loki to the other, and Loki, like, creates, like, a little backpack holder thing for it and sticks it in his back, and they look like they're ready to go on, like, this fantasy adventure. There's this cool little team up with that they're kind of building visually with him and Sylvie. And then from there, the Kid Loki, Alligator Loki, Classic Loki kind of, like, say their goodbyes, turn, and head off. Which just leaves us, Mobius and Loki and Sylvie. And as Mobius goes to leave, Loki asks what he's gonna do. He's like, just like Loki said to him at the beginning of the show, he's like, I'm gonna burn it to the ground. And he's like, thanks for the spark. See you later. Take it easy, Loki. And like, I got teared up, man, in this moment. Like, this moment hit me in the chest plate, dead center, so strong. But like, he's like, thanks for, and he puts his hand out to handshake it, and you see Loki start to go in for it, and he stops. And like, you can see it in Hiddleston's face that it's just like, no, I'm not gonna do it anymore. Like, I never expressed how I felt, to Thor, and obviously the Loki the original Loki that we had, we saw him get to have that moment with Thor. This Loki got to see that moment happen, but he never had it. He never got to physically feel that moment, and he's like, I'm not gonna let that happen anymore. And he just runs in and gives Mobius this like massive hug, and like the emotion is just on Hiddleston's face. And Mobius is just like, there too, but like also realizes that it's a little tense because Sylvie's right there. And he's like, but you're my favorite, trying to kind of break the tension. As they kind of depart from each other, Loki just looks at him and he goes, thank you, my friend. And he goes off into a TVA door, confirming that temp pads do work, and I can't wait to see what he does at the TVA next week. I'm really pumped to see what happens at a TVA, because I don't think Sylvie and Loki are going back there. It's going to be Mobius to have to bring down that stuff. So I'll be pumped to see if he runs into Renslayer or where we go with him from there. But now we're just with Loki and Sylvie, and there are these weird freaking birds everywhere. They're like purplish, and then they have no head but just this kind of bouncing floating ball that's also purple. Kind of like, it's just weird. If anybody knows what those are, please tell me that down below in the comments, because I sure as hell don't know what they are. But anyway, from there we kind of cut back and we see Kid Loki and Holt and Alligator Loki and Classic Loki, and they're walking away, and Classic Loki stops and just kind of turns back, and almost like he's giving just one last gander, but as we'll see, it's him having second thoughts about leaving Loki and Sylvie behind, and sets up an unbelievably iconic, wonderful moment for Richard E. Grant in the show. And as I've said multiple times, man, like, this finale is movie quality good. And the action sequence that we get here as Loki and Sylvie take on Alioth is just, it's breathtaking to watch, and it's gorgeous. And as they're kind of sitting there, like, even Lady Loki or Sylvie at one point, is kind of pointed out, like, he's going to go for the biggest thing first, so we need to create a distraction of some kind. And Loki's just like, I got it. He's like, I got it. And he just takes off, and he runs away from Sylvie, and he takes the sword out, and he sets it ablaze, which they've done in the comics, and, it's just like, hey, over here, look at me. And Alioth kind of swings his, lock onto Loki and kind of moves in with that, like I said, animalistic skeleton, like, dog head type visual. And as he's going for Loki, I think he starts to realize, like, Loki is not the big thing in this area. And, like, as he gets closer and kind of realizes what it is, he then shifts his attention back to Sylvie, and Loki is like, no, over here, hey. And you see him sprinting, and again, beautiful, like, drone wide shot where you can just see him running, and the gap between him and Sylvie is like so far. You're like, he's never gonna outrun this thing. And all of a sudden, like, the whole left side of the screen just lights up green, and like, you have this wonderful shot of Sylvie sitting there, Alioth coming right at her, like, jaws open to just swallow her, and you cut back and you see her face like, shoot, this plan, like, went to crap real fast. Like, we failed epically. And all of a sudden, like I said, you just see this huge green light, and Alioth stops and swings his attention, and Classic Loki has come back. And Richard E. Grant just, like, gives one of the best performances you're gonna get for, like, a one episode and I'm out type of performance, man. As he conjures up with his magic Asgard, and like, we get a couple more of these wonderful sweeping camera shots that kind of bring you in and show you the detail. Like, this thing is so accurate to Asgard. Like, the level of magic power that Classic Loki is using here is through the roof insanely good, and it distracts Alioth to the point where it's like, something way bigger than them has just arrived here. I need to go take whatever this is down. And then Sylvie kind of turns to Loki and is like, how is he doing this? And Loki's just like, I think we're stronger than we realize. And like, we've seen that in the show, right? Like, we've seen our Loki, like, stop a tower from falling and putting it back, like, stronger than you would realize. What Classic Loki is doing is, like, crazy and, like, again, like, stronger than you probably realize. You have more power than you think. And this kind of cues Sylvie to just immediately grab Loki's hand, like, if we're stronger than we think, maybe together, that's the answer to all this. And Loki right away is like, what are you doing? She's like, we're gonna enchant him together. And he's like, I don't know how to. And she's like, of course you do. Like, we're the same person. Like, you and me. Like, one, there's this connection thing going on. And, like, if we're both Lokis, like, it's in there. You just have to find it. And she's like, I think that you can. So they kind of start to try to do it. And you see, like, these kind of darker tendrils come out. And, you know, Sylvie is able to grab a hold of it. And Loki is trying, but he can't get it. And it's kind of sparking. And you're seeing Alioth kind of go for parts of Asgard, and it disappears. And classic Loki is just enjoying the heck. I mean, Richard E. Grant's having such a good time. And he's laughing, smile on his face. He starts to build other things to keep Alioth distracted. And just as Alioth has knocked down enough of the illusion, and classic Loki has used so much power that he's kind of running out of gas. You know, Loki kind of locks in, and they both like have their hands lit up green, and simultaneously they both close their eyes. And you know, we see Alioth kind of knock out the rest of, you know, Asgard as it disappears. As you know, classic Loki can't really conjure anything else up, and you know, he sees what's going on, and he just gets himself up, musters every last little bit of strength he has, throws one more thing that sends Alioth right at him, and he just looks up with this like grin and this like it looked like it was ripped off the page of the comics, man. It's so good. And he's just, you know, with this like kind of joy, like, at least I get to decide how I go out. And maybe this will be better for everybody. Like, he accepts the fact that, like, you can change. You know, Mobius says to them, you know, like, when they ask him, like, why he's doing what he's doing, like, you're going against everything you ever knew when they were in that little shack. And he's like, you know, people have the ability to change. And classic Loki gets that moment right there where he does reach that level of change. And it's like, I can do something for the good. And as Alioth eats him up, you see him disappear. His helmet, aged what looks again like hundreds of years, kind of clatters to the ground. And you're like, damn, man, like, so quickly iconic and gone. Like, even before you could really spend any time with Richard E. Grant, which is, you know, I think something you could probably see coming. But like, damn, I would take it more because he was going to town on the performance. But nevertheless, you know, we cut back to the two, you know, Loki and Sylvie, and their eyes are closed. And as Alioth swings, you know, and starts to kind of push in on them, everything lights up green. And as everything lights up green, like, Sylvie kind of opens up her eyes, and she's like, oh my gosh, Loki, look, we did it. And sure enough, like, the green surges from their two arms, lights him all up, and they have enchanted him. And as they stand there, you kind of see him start to part, and he parts ways to, like, what looks like this portal doorway to what is exactly what Sylvie saw. It's that house, that castle, and could be the end of time. And as I've been saying, this kind of feels, again, like it's just screaming Kang. And in the background, behind the castle, you're seeing this beautiful, like, metallic-y, rainbow-looking colors kind of flowing up. And just the look of the colors. And at one point in the episode, when Sylvie is talking to Miss Minutes and Renslayer about, like, the timeline and the void being at the end of time, like, you see on the timeline the end, and it has the same kind of metallic, rainbowy colors that just, every time I've seen them, I just immediately go quantum realm. And one of these things that I haven't picked up on, but, like, you know, just when you're watching these movies and you're seeing other people's coverage, like, the little city that we see in the quantum realm in Ant-Man and the Wasp, like, a lot of people have been like, what's that city? Could that be Chronopolis? Like, could that be Kang? And maybe that's where the end of time is, you know, at this nexus in the quantum realm. You know, it's the same thing when they prune. They kind of light up very similarly in color to the quantum realm. So maybe that's where, you know, the void exists, is in that quantum realm somewhere. And at the end of time, that is like your nexus point and route to go to any of the timelines. It would make a ton of sense for that to be Kang, and for that to be Chronopolis, and for him to be behind all of this stuff with time, as he kind of is ruling and conquering the timeline, you know, with all the different variations of him. If you play however way you want to play it from the comics, but to acquire all of the just universes and places that he's conquered, like, it would make sense for him to be here. Now, if it's not Kang, and like I said, shout outs to the Real Rejects for bringing up Loki, it also could make a ton of sense for Loki to be there. The fact that this whole show has been a deep dive into Loki as a character and what drives and makes a Loki, and one of those most important things that we keep seeing with all the Lokis who haven't been able to change is that they need to rule something. Well, maybe Loki is at the end of this thing. And maybe it is, you know, the trickster god pulling the ultimate trick and, like, is ruling the timeline from behind the scenes. But how could he get there? Like, granted, Lokis are stronger than we know. But, like, that seems like a bit of a stretch that it's just him. But if you tie it into one of my original theories, which was that Sylvie may have been working for Kang the way Loki worked for Thanos, Loki working for the next big bad. Maybe this Loki at the end of time, if he's in that castle, is working for Kang. Maybe Kang saw him as a threat, figured out a way to win him over, use what makes Loki a Loki to his advantage, and convince him, like, hey, if you team up with me, I'll let you rule all of time. You can make all the decisions, and, you just kind of keep all this stuff in place so I can go out and do whatever the heck it is I'm doing. There is a pathway, I think, that you could get there with this story of Loki's, where, like, Loki could be sitting in that chair, pulling the theoretical strings, and it would make a ton of sense as to why it only seems Loki's get pruned. Or people who start to figure out what's going on behind the TVA. But literally, outside of Mobius, everybody we see inside of the Void, outside of Alioth and, like I said, Mobius, are Lokis. Why would we pull... And the other thing that we've been asking is, like, why would you pull Lokis out of timelines when there's clearly no Nexus event? Like, yes, killing Thor, that theoretically could be a Nexus event. But what happened to Sylvie, she was just playing with toys. Well, if there's a Loki at the top of it, trying to make sure that none of the other Lokis step out of line and can kind of influence it. Like, it's just him kind of taking out all the other Lokis in the world. That would be a fascinating concept, and you could still have him overly working for the bigger big bad, which would be Kang, and it would be kind of ironic if you saw that, Hiddleston shot that we've seen of him in front of the throne. And it would be a really fascinating thing to see a Hiddleston Loki working for theoretically the next big bad of, the Marvel Universe. I think, like I've said, I think Kang is going to be the Phase 4 big bad. I think this is where you start building him. I still think that it's going to be Kang. I think the fact that Jonathan Majors was hired in December, right when the show was kind of finishing up some of its shooting, but was still shooting, to announce it that early, to re-announce it and reaffirm the fact that he's going to be Kang in Quantumania while Loki's going on. I think there's a really good chance the fact that he's been announced and cast, which would not have happened with Chthon or Mephisto, that there's a chance that we see him. But there's a way where that Loki theory could work, and I'm glad I heard the Real Reject say that, because it immediately got me thinking, I would certainly answer why Lokis just seem to be pruned or taken out of their timelines when they're not necessarily always causing a Nexus event. That would make a lot of sense, and the ultimate trickster god pulling a trick like the TVA actually being fake and fooling all those people, it plays. So I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated to see where we go. Like I said, Waldron's done such an excellent job with the show that he's set it up and built it in a way where it literally could go any number of ways, and any way that it goes, it could still be setting up the multiverse saga. It could still be setting up Kang and whatever's going on with Quantumania, and I just can't wait to see what all of the final answers are and see if any of our theories or thoughts that we've had during the course of Loki were right when we get there next week. But this week, Loki episode 5, Journey into Mystery, just brilliant, man. It gets better every week, and I think we are in for something really, really special next week. I just hope it's a long something special. And of course, the big surprise too that just kind of affirmed that this episode did everything it needed to do. No post-credit scene. So that's it, man. Those are all my spoiler thoughts on Loki episode 5, Journey into Mystery. This episode was fantastic, littered, packed with so much stuff. We had so many things to talk about. It's wild, and where we are, I'm just so excited to see what happens with Loki and with Sylvie. Can't wait to see what happens with Mobius and the TVA, and just to finally, hopefully, see the answers to everything. I know WandaVision got us to a place where it kind of gave us the overall reveal, but still left a lot of questions out there. I hope this one doesn't leave too many questions and just gives us all the answers that we're looking for. But episode 5, man, another stellar outing for Loki. I'm loving this show. Can't wait for next week. I am all done. I have exhausted myself once again. Now it is your turn. First, I appreciate you guys sticking in or jumping around if you use the chapter markers down below, but since you have stuck around for all of my blathering about the episode, now I want to know what you're thinking, man. What did you love? What popped out to you? What stood out? What Easter eggs did you pick up on that we didn't touch base with in here? I know there was a bunch of stuff in this episode that was littered through there that I definitely missed. So things that stood out to you, things that you liked. What did you think of the episode? Where do you think we're going? Are any of your theories still in play? Do you think it's Kang? Do you think it's Loki? Do you think it's somebody else? Anything you're thinking, good, bad, indifferent about Loki episode 5. goes down below in the comment section. Look forward to talking to you down there. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new, you want to come hang out with the C-Man as we approach our final week of Loki. You just want to be here anytime I'm talking movies, TV, trailer reactions. You dig what I'm doing on the channel. You want to show a little love, support to this whole guy. Well, then come. Join C-Maniac Nation. It's the best way to do it. You can do it by jumping over there, hitting that subscribe button, hit that little bell if you want those alerts. Until next time, for the C-Man, Cinema, sit down. I've been the C-Man, and I'm signing off. Peace, my babies.
Oh,
Hey, what's going on? You must be sticking around because you're looking for more content featuring this guy. Well, guess what? You're in the right place. You can check out more videos right here and right here. And if you have and you want to come join that C-Maniac Nation, you can hit that subscribe right over there.